My wife used to say to me, I wish you wouldn't do that, because I'd have a kind of special brew or something. And I remember saying, a working man's entitled to a drink at the weekend. And she said, it's Wednesday, you haven't worked for years. There's a denial that comes with the using that kind of creates the world around you and makes it palatable to you. And what happened, lots of people smoked dope around me, lots of people drank. But some of us seem to continue on the same path. And then, you know, as soon as I had a chance, somebody said to me, we've got morphine. And there was a guy there who knew how to inject. And he injected my friend first and then me. And I said to the guy in front of me, what's it like? And he said, it's not like anything. There are no comparisons at this moment. And I remember having that hit. And for me, it was like I'd been hanging out all over the place. Suddenly I condensed in and I was whole again for the first time. I was no longer afraid. I was no longer ashamed. I was no longer awkward and stuttering. I could talk to women. It was like everything, you know, it was like suddenly I was whole. And it was like I'd arrived. And so I saw other people who used the same drug. They didn't have that effect because they were kind of all right in the first place. But for me, it filled that gaping sort of wound inside, and it just, I suddenly felt okay. Because the thing about addiction and alcoholism, the tyranny of it is that it's very conservative. You live a very conservative life when you're using. It's not a wild, romantic, you know, business. It's usually quite dreary and domestic. You know, eventually, it may start off, you know, with acid and all the rest of it. It might be a kind of wild spiritual odyssey, but usually eventually it condenses down to something habitual. You know, just speaking for myself, when I went to a treatment centre and I was desperate, I was withdrawing from methadone, I wanted to get my bag packed and leave the place. I was going, you don't understand, you know, I've got to have something and all this, and they just held their line. And eventually they got a guy in there who was one of the patients, and he came to see me, and he said, what's happening? And I told him, and he said, that's how I felt 3 weeks ago. And he was still there. And that was the kind of, that's the therapeutic value of one addict helping another. And there are different definitions of addiction. Look how dope's perceived, or how it was perceived, as perfectly reasonable. You know, it's not heroin, it's not a hard drug, it's something that's spiritually enlightening. But we both know that smoking skunk every day, it's not that. It becomes something else. You wouldn't, you know, as somebody said, you wouldn't go up and ask someone to give you a heart attack or to take all your money out of the bank or to, you know, help you be an absent father. And yet that's what we do and we use. This is my kind of non-judgmental take on all this stuff, is it doesn't matter what you do if you're all right with it. You know, if you're able to be honest about it and say, but if it's separating you from your family, your children, your life, your work, there's a problem.